Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hello, everybody. This is Carter Froelich, and welcome to the Land to Lots podcast. It's great to be before you here again today. And I've got to tell everybody, I've really been looking forward to today's podcast because I'm going to have the ability to talk with Paul Johnson, the former Executive Vice President of Community Development for the Rancho Mission Viejo company located in Southern California. We're going to talk a little bit about Rancho Mission Viejo in just a minute. And joining Paul is Teri Slavik Suki, the founder of TST Inc., that's INK. And she is a communication and integrated marketing expert. Her firm is located in San Diego, and she's been working with Paul over the years in the branding and of Rancho Mission Viejo company. So with that, Paul, welcome. Teri, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Carter. It's going to be fun to be here. It's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, gentlemen.
Teri, thanks. And Paul, Teri, what I'd really like to do is have this just be a free-flowing, integrated conversation related to developing, building, and executing on a master plan community vision. And, maybe we'll break it up a little bit, talking about what I call the physical plant, meaning the land, the infrastructure, the planning that goes into that. And then let's move into some of the quote unquote soft infrastructure or the soft plant related to the programming, the amenities, lifestyle, all of the things that go in to help build and create that vision. But Paul, before we, jump into this conversation, why don't we set the stage for Rancho Mission Viejo as it relates to the master plan, and because I would like to use that as our reference, if you will, for our discussion today. And obviously, you've been involved with that project for a long time, but taking the concepts that we're going to be discussing and applying those, or how you applied them to the ranch, and then Teri, your insight and everything that you do as it relates to creating the brand, the lifestyle, the marketing as it relates to a master plan community. So with that, Paul, you want to just give us a high level view of the ranch?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in, as you might say, at the 40,000 foot level. But before I begin, I am former EVP, but so I just really got to thank you, Carter, for reaching out. I've been blessed and honored to work for Rancho Mission Viejo for 30 years. I thought 30 years was a good number to pull the plug and try something new, but a tremendous journey with a privately held company that really has left a legacy in South Orange County. Really have created most of what you see out there: Mission Viejo, Rancho Santa Margarita, Las Flores. I was involved in Rancho Santa Margarita, then on to Ladera Ranch, and then on to Rancho Mission Viejo being their final 23,000 acres. So what master plans? It's a big term. I'm going to stop a moment and throw out an idea or an opinion which I have, and that is master plans come in many sizes: small, medium, large. Just pick those three. And as you move up on that scale, small to me, 0 to 2,000 units, medium, maybe 2,000 to 5. When you get into large, you're probably 5, 8, 10. I mean, Rancho Mission Viejo has 14,000 units. It's really important to keep an eye on the scale. The larger the scale, the more complexity you are required to really deal with. And you're really dealing with a much longer time frame. And it is that complexity and time frame that make medium and large scale master plans a very thoughtful process. You need to jump in and know, hey, if you've got 10,000 units, you may be doing that plan for 15, 18, 20 years, depending on where and economic cycles. So I think I enjoy that large scale. I like complexity. kind of like the requirement to be an innovator and be a change maker over time. So that's kind of sets the stage for this conversation, because what I'm talking about is very large master plans, 8, 10, and 13, 14,000 units. So how do we start? Planning Area 3, first off, is in the very center of the ranch, of this 23,000 acres. It is the heart, and it sits in a location right above the historic cow camp. And so it is a large, very large piece of property, 7,000 units, and had a lot of sensitivity to its position above the historic cow camp area, which is where the family has always run their agricultural and cattle operations. So, Terry, you'll remember this. We started off with a 2 or 3 day ideation where it was really important to bring the stakeholders, the family together, the agricultural side, the cattle, bring the stakeholders into a conversation and ask them, what do you want? How do you see this piece of property unfolding given its importance? And from that meeting of having all these ideas on a piece of paper, really began a very long, it took us a good year to take all those ideas, unfold them into, it was really kind of fun. 3 very unique landforms, and I run multidisciplinary teams. I think you get far more out of any journey or exercise by getting a lot of input. But through that, we generated 3 very different landforms. We ended up evaluating those in depth. What really happened is we picked one, but one really blended in ideas from the other 2 and led us to, over a very long process, to what was the final illustrative that we all said, this is how Planning Area 3 should look. And I'll stop here in a minute because I want some of Teri's input, but that process really has to focus on everything. Planning Area 3 is a 10 or 15 year build out. And so you got to know where is its position in the market? Who are the home buyers that you're attracting? And over time, those home buyers are going to change. The scale was so large, we broke it into villages because you want people to feel connected. They can't connect to 7,000 units, but they can connect to villages, which are 1,000 plus or minus units. Then you got to make sure the villages can interconnect. So you pay attention to road alignments, landform, infrastructure. In a planning area that big, we were dealing with 3 major bridges, water systems we had to put in, expansion of their sewer treatment plant. The list is quite long of what you're keeping track of to finally pick unit count. When you're done, you got to know that planning area, if you got 7,000 units you want to put in there, you clearly can get 7,000, along with that area. That planning area has about 2.5 million square feet of non-residential. So you keep a long list, and then you really are managing to check the boxes that illustrative, which is going to start the journey and change over time, can really accomplish what you're looking to do.
And Paul, I made a huge list of questions that I've got to ask you, and then I'm going to back up a little bit, and Teri, if you want to jump in, because for those listeners that may not be familiar with Rancho Mission Viejo, I encourage you to go on Wikipedia and read this colorful, storied history of what was I think about a 250,000 acre, rancho in Southern California. But I want to back up a little bit, and because you mentioned 3 different landforms, and treating the land as a canvas, from which you're starting to bring this vision together. And then you also talked about the family and the former cow camp, and Teri, I know history and branding, and it's always better to do it of the place rather than some kind of made up name. And I mean, that's me personally, but let's just kind of talk about the land as canvas and history. But Teri, do you want to jump in and kind of piggyback off of what Paul was saying, and then we'll drill down into more and more detail.
Thanks, Carter. Certainly. And it's an honor to be here. And it's a challenge, quite frankly, to follow Paul Johnson and the way he lays out what's been happening at the ranch over a number of years. So maybe I'll start by saying, I was the chief marketing officer at Newland Communities for about 11 years. And while you use the term marketing and branding, and most people think of that as advertising and promotion, really my core job at Newland was what we called community startup. And so whenever we acquired a new piece of land, I would go out into the regions and work with the regional development and operations teams like the one that Paul led at the ranch and help them really kind of understand who will live here and how do they want to live. And so when I left Newland, it was truly an honor and a blessing when Paul reached out and said, hey, we've got this piece of land called Planning Area 3. I kind of like what you do, and I'd love you to come and help us figure out how we host this ideation and help create the vision for this next planning area at the ranch. And one of the things that Paul is so good at, and I think really has infiltrated how everybody at the ranch thinks, is describing the notion of creativity and thinking about this as a door frame. And when you think about being a creative individual or, in some manner, whether you're a finance person and all the multidisciplinary teams that come to play here, a land planner, an architect, a landscape architect, a builder, a home builder, creativity is about having one foot in the known and the other in the unknown and being comfortable with that tension. And Paul's exactly right. We led an ideation over 2.5 days that included 55 people. I counted it last week, 55 different stakeholders. And that included, all the members of the family, which clearly had a role to play and were very, very concerned and supportive of their legacy. It also included people like Jay Walker Smith from Kantar, John McManus, who was the editorial director at Builder Magazine, home building partners, research firms like John Burns Real Estate Consulting, like Mark Bowd and his group. And really what we did is we took all of those insights and all of those perspectives, and then over that course of that period of time, really drove to finding a solution for Planning Area 3 that would serve the consumers that we know would live there. And we kept one eye on the future. So we're looking forward, as Paul said, to how does this master plan have to evolve and change over time? So really, I think what I'd like to suggest at the beginning of this conversation is community is not about product, it's about people. And I think that is one of the things that Rancho Mission Viejo and the team there has done so incredibly well over so many decades, which is why it's been the subject of Urban Land Institute case studies. It's been the subject of many, many tours through PCBC, through the Global Wellness Institute and others.
So in jumping back and piggybacking off of that, and Paul, this is next coming to you. So when you were given Planning Area 3, for instance, which 7,000 units, 3.5 million of commercial over time, 10 to 15 year build out, you got to move, I think, about 85 million cubic yards of dirt over the development period, which is just a huge, I can just see all the big iron moving all over that right now, and especially in sensitive areas. But so we have this land form where we're having an ideation with stakeholders, a family, coming together with who is going to be living here, how are they going to be living, and then we have this land form, right, that we're working with to bring all of these pieces into and make it in a coherent fashion. After that is, you have the idea. Do you then start drilling down into coming up with developing some guiding principles, which maybe, here's our vision on a very high level to what are the streetscapes looking like? I mean, I'm just being kind of, the whole spectrum, but how do you take it from there, Paul?
Well, first and foremost, when you're right, this is a big landform and it's a complex landform, lots of hills and valleys. First off, we focused on getting, I call the phasing correct, the villages. Once you know how the villages and the big streets, you have streets divide things. They don't bring things together. At a certain scale, streets create barriers for people feeling connected. So you got a village and you've got a 6-lane highway running through the middle of it. You really have a village A and B. It's not easy for people to do that. So we worked hard first off to pay attention that people need to feel connected in such a large landform, and that the villages had a purpose to why we said this is, we eventually have all the villages named. Riend is the first one we're building. But then we knew as you unfold a village of 1,000 units, that's going to be 2, 3, 4 phases. And grading is the most expensive component in land development. So we can't, the organization can't export dirt. They can import dirt, but that whole project, 85 million cubic yards, has to self-balance. And as we graded every phase, we wanted to know if something were to go economically wrong, we don't have to continue on. We didn't want to produce 1,000 lots when we're only going to sell 400 in that phase. So there was a pretty intensive effort to understand how each phase graded, that it's balancing closely within its boundaries, not 100%, and that we could very conservatively, and that's a good term, move through that landform over that period of time. And if the economic times get great, grade 2, 3 phases, because you can move more lots.
Right.
If it's slowing down, you can slow down, and you're not ending up putting a financial burden on the outcome of the project. So that's minutia. But once you can get all that feeling really good, then what's really fun about the ranch is the ranch has been doing this since the mid-1960s. They've always been on the outskirts, deep South County. Their family's philosophy has always been, we need to do more. We have to attract people to drive past Irvine and come out here to the hinterland. So there's always a philosophy there of paying attention to a real working community. People want connections, they want parks, they want places to go eat and shop. And so they've always had more of we're building a city. Mm-hmm. And cities need to be complete. So they learned a lot in Mission Viejo. We learned more in Rancho Santa Margarita. Ladera kind of was a great experimental time in the 2000s where they perfected what they carried on, really solid placemaking. Right. Not just the physical place, but they always were working on how do we bring the social infrastructure. So once we got to Rancho Mission Viejo, we had a playbook.
Yeah.
And that playbook was pretty well tested. And so we were bringing things into the first village of Sendero, then we went to Esencia. It wasn't as though we started from scratch. We already had our PhD. We were just playing around with, what's the next thing that we know we should bring because of our home buyers? What are they really wanting and doing? And so we know we wanted parks and clubs and trails, curb separated sidewalks, street trees. And that we think is magic that we do really well. We just continue to want to enhance that.
If I can just build on something Paul said at the beginning, the complexity of every week's conversation, and we gathered for a week, every week, or for more than a year, every week in the land planner's office, and looked at the engineers would talk about grading and the grading plan and cut and fill and all that stuff. We obsessed, like literally obsessed, 3 different canyons. Can we save these canyons? Which one makes the most sense? But what I want to impress upon your listeners is I think something that's really unique in the world of larger scale master planning, which is the need to be able to look at the land mass and the land plan at both 40,000 feet, which addresses all the things Paul said about engineering and grading and dirt movement, but also at 5 feet at the exact same time. So that's why the multidisciplinary team and having those right voices at the table is so important, because somebody who's really focused on, the human experience and customers and product decisions with home builders might be closer to the 5-foot level, and may not have as deep of an understanding as an engineer or land planner might at the 40,000 foot level. But the combination of those 2 perspectives really helps make sure that we make planning and development decisions that make the right trade-offs at the most largest scale, so that the end result of the community, when you're on the ground walking it, really results in what your intentions were. So I think that's a really unique thing, and it's really speaks to the complexity that Paul talks about a lot here.
Well, and the other thing too, and when Paul was talking about the grading, I'm thinking, boy, that's both a constraint and an opportunity, right?
Right.
And so how do we think about our phasing, and are we going for one phase? Are we going for two? That's dependent upon the market, but has grading as both a constraint and an opportunity. I think back to Seaside way back in the day where they would build one street at a time, primarily because they didn't have any money. That's not the challenge with Rancho Mission Viejo, but the ending lot or home sales price of that street then became the beginning sales price for the next street's lot and or housing. And Paul, to that end, I'm just geeking out a little bit on financing and revenue, and then I'm going to go back into to the villages and the constraints and identifying the villages. But has the grading constraint helped with creating for what now Rancho Mission Viejo is what I like to refer to as an infill project to some degree? Has that created additional value enhancement as it relates to the overall operation?
Well, certainly, I mean,
Plan
for
scarcity,
sure.
yeah.
Grading, again, because it is such a expensive component of the pro forma, and you have to pay attention to it when you're moving. Any given phase can be 5, 8, 10 million yards. It really has an impact on the financial outcome. So because we do place such close attention to it, I don't think we're overwhelmed by doing that financial analysis and digging in. I mean, planning area 3 will literally be 15, 18 years. We know today, they know today, they're only in the first village, exactly how. I think we ended up with 14 phases. They know how every one of those phases grades. They have, and everything's done digitally now. So if something were to change, they can go back, they can adjust, they know it self balances. I don't know of anyone. Some people might have thought we're crazy. Why are you grading an entire project if it's going to take 15 years? Well, grading it on paper and having that information is very powerful. And what we do when we grade because we're creating that illustrative. We know we want to create these paths with these views. We're also trying to think like builders, that we know what builders want, what sells better, where values are in view premiums, cul-de-sac streets versus through streets. Literally, we got to put all the hats on. We got to have our developer hat, and we got to put the home builder hat on, and we got to put on the consumer, the home buyer's hat, and go, we got a mixed product segmentation. We believe that great communities have a wide variety of owners. So apartments, high density, small, single family, detached, high density, and up the chain. We didn't do custom homes yet, but you never know. Planning area 3 someday. But it's that variety of product that also bring a high mix of people. And at some point, I want to talk about the 55 plus, because I think, as Teri will say, that's a very unique component we brought to the ranch, to Rancho Mission Viejo.
Hey, Teri, you're on, but I got to ask you one question. So in other words, we have the known and then we have the unknown. We have 1 foot in the known, 1 foot in the unknown. Paul's got a playbook that has been developed over the years of, Rancho Santa Margarita, etc. So, but we're in this first village right now. We know what the builders want, and I know what the builders want. They could build the same thing on every lot. They'd probably do it, so how is that tension, between what the consumer wants, how the consumer is changing, what this village's identity is, where you think the market is going, and then talking to builders that have, a certain way of doing thing, and how do you bring those all those diverse opinions and views together to create the magic? So you're on.
That is a great question, and I love it because that's the secret sauce. And what we do, especially at Rancho Mission Viejo, I think they were again one of the top in the nation at this, is you invite your builder partners under the tent, and you invite them to learn what you learn. And before the ideation even happened, the ranch invested in some pretty intense direct primary consumer research. So we went out and we actually spoke to consumers who may have been home shoppers at the ranch previously or in the submarket area overall, because as you said, Carter, if you only know what you know, right? So Henry Ford said that, black Model T Fords would sell because that's all he produced. Then that's sort of a supply side rear view mirror looking approach at things. If you always model your forward looking planning on what's traded in the last 12 months, I can tell you based on what the consumer insights showed us, you're missing a lot of opportunities. So as a result of those consumer insights at the ranch, we learned that there was a perception that, as Paul alluded to a moment ago, the ranch was doing a great job in serving what I'll call the bookends, kind of, sort of the younger buyers in the smaller product, and then the 55 plus buyers in the Gavilon product. But the core Gen X buyers and the older millennial buyers didn't see themselves there. So we really looked at those insights and collaborated with builders in detailed, in-depth, one-on-one meetings where we showed them the results of the research and really asked, how might we work with you to create new product opportunities that work within the land form that we have before us to diversify the offering at the ranch and really allow them to be more successful in absorption and in land values?
I think Teri's right on that. We look at our builders as truly partners. We don't do anything unique. If it's impacting a builder, we're having a conversation with some of our builders to understand their perspective. We're wise enough to know we can have a great idea, but we can't force that on a builder without there being some consequence. So new ideas have to be really shown to the builders. The builders have to give you their opinion. You have to accept maybe your idea is a little too bold and you can cut it back they move along in a different world. But builders are in this 18, 24-month cycle that is different than our thinking, which is 3 and 5 and 8 years. So we always have taken our builders under our wings, and we really appreciate and want their opinion. It is together that we've made great strides. Randa brought an attached project to the market at 28 units to the acre, at a time when we needed to really reach out to those first-time buyers and offer something that was better than renting an apartment. And so we didn't do that we did that because we knew it was needed, but we really had to find a builder who said, absolutely, I'm on board with that. So it's a joint process. You've always got to think about, you're not forcing anyone along. You're really a team starting out with this journey and doing this execution.
This concludes part 1 of our series with Paul Johnson, the former executive vice president of the Rancho Mission Viejo company, as well as Teri, Slavik, Suki, the founder of TNT Inc., on visioning, planning, and executing the development of a master plan community. Come back for the next installment of this series, and if you find this podcast interesting or helpful, please share it with your colleagues or others that will appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening, and be sure to subscribe to the Land to Lots podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.